All right, and we'll just go ahead and get started. Yeah, Tony, you ready?
Yep, all set.
Excellent. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for attending our webinar today. This is Financing 201, where we're going to cover sales strategy and qualification. I'm Nicole Newell, Director of Finance, Sales, and Operations here at 4 Inc. Also presenting today's content on the line with me is Tony Egan. She's our VP of Finance Solutions. A little background on Tony and I, just to get a little bit of credibility here with you guys. I've been in the federal market for over 20 years. I spent 10 years at a reseller and distribution partner. And Tony most recently joined us from Key Bank, actually, where she is bringing over 25 years of financing experience, but of course, more from that banking and lending side. Before we get started and jump into the content today, I did want to say that today's session is being recorded, as have some of the prior sessions. There is a chat box. Everyone is muted, but if you have any questions, we encourage you to put those into the chat box. If we don't get to your question, we will leave you with our contact information and strongly encourage you to reach out to us. Welcome that opportunity to speak with you individually. Jump in here. Sorry, my slide's not advancing. There we go. There's our pretty little faces. So jumping into Financing 201. This is really a session that we tried to break out into a four-part series that would cover some of the various aspects of the life cycle of a financed opportunity. In 101, we covered some of the financing fundamentals and how to approach your pipeline. If you missed that record, or if you missed that presentation, we do have a recording of it and we're happy to share that with you. Today, we're going to go through the sales strategy and some deal qualification. And then in the next series that we're going to do in a couple of months is going to be on the proposal stage and submission for RFQs. And then 401, we're going to close up with our closing the best deal for you and your company. We are going to package this up at the end of the year and then send it out to all who attended. So you have the entire series if you want to go back and look at it at a later time. I wanted to just mention financing is not a difficult thing to do. It's really not. But there is a process that you have to engage in to get these deals done. And you want to be sure that you're aligned with the right partner to get you to the right outcome. And so, with that, I'm just going to kind of touch on a little plug here on 4 Inc. As I mentioned, I've been with the company for 10 years. We were born out of doing finance transactions. That was kind of our lot in life 18 years ago. We have financed over 4.5 billion in finance transactions to date. But through the evolution of our business, we have kind of grown over the past few years into actually public sector IT distribution. And so we actually work with a broad set of OEM clients, as we call them, or suppliers, as some distribution partners call their clients. This is really the OEMs, but then also by extension, the channel partners. And we provide a bunch of value-added services to help grow public sector IT business. Tony and I sit in this finance deal and lifecycle management. This is the value pillar and differentiator, I would argue, about our business. Because we've been doing this for a really long time. We have a lot of knowledge and expertise to share with you. And so highly encourage you to reach out to us and see how we can help you close bigger and better deals. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Tony so that she can provide just a little bit of introductory into some of the sales strategy elements and then also a little bit around a market update. Tony.
Thanks, Nikki. And thanks everybody for jumping on this morning. Just adding some more to what Nikki was saying, it's not complicated, but there's a lot of information to pack into these sessions, and we always sort of wrestle with, the different levels of experience with these kind of structures. So, our goal is not to make anybody a federal financing expert, right? Our goal really if you take anything away from today's session, is we really just want to get you guys to a place where you're comfortable enough to introduce the concept of base plus contracts into your sales process and confident enough in our ability and our experience to bring us in to help you build out these things and ultimately close more. So just want to, demonstrate that value, get you comfortable and, help you guys go out and find more opportunities. Nikki, if you could go to the next slide. So before we get into the strategy piece of this, I thought it made sense just to do a quick pulse of the market. Although it's changing so fast, it's probably going to be different by the time we wrap up. So I'll do my best. But we could spend the entire call talking through what's happening on Capitol Hill right now. But we just wanted to highlight some of the things that we're tracking as they relate to our business. The first one being the Big Beautiful Bill Act, right? That's the wide-ranging bill that was passed in the House. I don't know if it was last night or this morning, but among other things, that outlines the priorities for the fiscal 2026 budget. And there's winners and losers in that, right? The winners are those agencies that are going to have increase in their budgets over last year, include Department of Defense, anything related to border security, so DOJ, DHS, and then there's some other agencies like agriculture and state that will see some increases. So, but there's also agencies that are going to lose some funding with this, and primarily it's energy, some of the latest legislative branch offices, military construction is going to be down, and transportation and HUD will also see some decreases in their budgets over last year. But it's the goal is to have the Senate pass this before the 4th of July, and there's talk of them making some adjustments to it. So we'll have to see how that all plays out. And then everybody's favorite new agency, DOGE. Undoubtedly, DOGE's initiatives are fundamentally reshaping federal procurement in a major way, right? Well, they're emphasizing efficiency and accountability and cost reduction, regardless of political positions. It's been very disruptive to the normal course of business. And, some agencies have been more effective than others, right? You think USAID and Social Security had some large contracts canceled, and GSA is going through some major overhaul. But the actual impact on IT procurement has been relatively small, right? We're seeing more of an impact on things like DEI and green initiatives, workforce reduction. I think we're up to like 250,000 federal employees either were let go or took early buyouts. And there's more scrutiny around cancellation of cost plus or advanced services contracts, which has impacted the integrator business more than channel partners. But even they're adopting to DOGE by trying to bring forth solutions around automation and efficiency. So, they're migrating with the times as well. But overall, mostly what we're seeing is that uncertainty, which has slowed down some procurement activity, right? From our vantage point, the bigger shift that we're seeing is a change in how government's talking about contracting. Like there's more of a focus on sort of the justification of contracts, and we're hearing more commercial vernacular, if you will, things like return on investment or return on asset that you never really heard government talk about before. But again, all of this, it bodes well for us because we believe that when the dust settles around all of this, that when agencies have less people and reprioritize budgets, that the things we're talking about here are going to be more valuable than ever, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But more changes coming, right, in the form of the executive order moving all IT procurement to GSA, right? I'm not sure that there's an executive order that has caused more questions than this one. But again, the goal is to push uniformity and efficiencies through one contracting offices. DoD has pushed back on this, so it's going to hit the civilian agencies first. And while they're, again, it's all playing out, but there's some pretty aggressive deadlines for agencies to try to do this. So this is moving pretty quickly. And one of the initiatives that's come out of this is GSA's strategy called OneGov, which I'm sure you've all heard about. It's the push for agencies to be able to purchase directly from OEMs and bypass the channel. And there's been a couple transactional deals like with Adobe and Microsoft that have been done under this guidance, but there's been a great deal of skepticism and pushback from industry on this model, right? Like, do OEMs even want to procure this way? Do they have the infrastructures to be able to transact that way? And can they change their business models for just federal, right? Because that's a big adjustment for them. But there's also other economic impacts, like how it affects the small business community and the channel partner community. And does the government lose by not having the value prop that the channel brings? So all of those things have to play out. We're watching them super closely, but despite the chaos, what we found is there's pretty much universal agreement that there is value to what it is that we all do in the channel, and that agencies are really going to be looking for help adopting these new rules, and it's going to fall on us to help them do that. Um, so with all of the reduction in staff and their different budgets, they still have mandates, they still have old antiquated equipment, and we strongly believe that, again, at the end of when some of this dust settles, the KOs are going to be forced to look at alternative methods of procuring against traditional methods, because they're not going to be able to do what they used to do. Nikki, can you go to the next slide, please? So that's a good segue into what it is that we're offering here and what we're talking about, right? So how do you help your customer overcome all of this challenge and change in time, and bring real value to them, right? So historically, when selling to the federal government, the conversation usually focused on, how much money they had, right? Like, what's in the budget, and then everything was scaled around that number, limiting your sale and narrowing options for the agency. And it's an age-old, band-aid approach that it was trying to fix bigger problems. And what we're proposing here as a strategy is flipping that conversation and turning it completely around, where you go in and you listen to your customer and their needs, and you come up with a solution that not only provides them with the latest and greatest technology, but also a far compliant way to pay for that, right? So think about that. Like, they can get everything they need now, roll it all up with soft costs like install and training, leverage their existing appropriated funds, and achieve additional savings and more contract efficiency to help meet mission objectives, right? Like, that is a very powerful conversation to have with them. And it gets them, if they're not focusing on the money on the upfront part of it, then they can really sit down and help you assess what it is that they truly need. And it puts you in the position of being that trusted advisor for them, right? That partner that helps them acquire all the things they need, and you'll own that customer for the life of the contract, right? Which is also a very positive thing. So we're going to walk through a couple of examples of how this works, and I will give it over to Nikki.
Thanks, Tony. So, in looking at these opportunities, numbers really matter, right? We get, like, when we're talking about financing deals, often these are very large, strategic. People ask us often, what's a good size that we should start thinking about leveraging financing? And it really comes down to it just depends, right? It depends on if it's subscription, if it's hardware, what's being purchased, what's the essential use story, all of that good stuff, and how it comes together. But ultimately, you've got to be thinking about that in the context of the broader, right? The opportunity for the customer and accounting for all the channel revenues for distribution, resellers, et cetera. And so when your customer is asking for a budgetary quote, you want to make sure that you're accounting for all these things, that you're thinking ahead, that if you're going to leverage financing in an opportunity, that you've got this kind of mindset of, let me make sure I'm accounting for all the numbers. So I'm going to break this out into two different ways. One is just showing you, like, when we get numbers from an OEM or from a channel partner, we ask those questions, right? We're walking through the process to say, okay, are we building up a model to say, hey, there's a cost of goods here, and then you're adding the margins in between for the partner and distribution, and then we're adding financing fees on top, and then we're kind of breaking these payments out? Or are we backing into a model, and that be it, we know what the government price rough estimate based upon maybe some conversations that you've had, or an existing renewal, something along those lines, we know that what that number needs to look like to the customer or a rough estimate, and then we back into a funding number. So I just wanted to kind of lay that out to say these are the two ways that we look at it when we are financing. So often when we get engaged with you, we'll start walking through and asking some of these questions to make sure that we're helping you think through that process. I know it sounds elementary, but you'd be surprised, right? I think all of us have varying levels of experience when it comes to financing. And so we really do try to break it out into a process that makes sure that we're thinking of all of these step by step. And so this just being one example of how we look at financing when we're adding costs on top or backing in. And so ultimately, you're selling value here. When you are talking with your government customers and you're thinking you want to make a bigger, better deal for your company, for yourself, maybe based upon how you get commissioned, or you're solving for a customer challenge where maybe they've got a budget shortfall. Either way, you've got to sell value. You got to tell the customer what's in it for them. And so these examples are the way that we suggest and recommend that you tee up a financed opportunity. And financing doesn't always mean like you're talking to the customer. I say this a lot, but I just want to reiterate it. You're not necessarily talking to the customer about financing unless they're asking for it. If they're asking for a financed opportunity, then fine, financing and talking about financing is kind of the path that you go down. But if they're not asking for a financed opportunity, you're really trying to get creative in what you're offering and what you're presenting to your customer. And it really comes down to base plus option contracts. That's really what's getting financed on the back end. And we don't want them to perceive that there is some type of contingent liability or they're obligating in the out years. And so you really want to be thinking about this from a standpoint of base plus options. And so how do you sell that value? Well, this example is our budget shortfall. This is if there's a perpetual license that's being purchased or some type of hardware asset where there's a heavy upfront that needs to be purchased. And so often it's what does a 1 year at a time look like for this type of purchase? Well, let's just say there's a hardware asset or that's being purchased, and then you've got your out year sustainment, maintenance, support, etc. So maybe over the 3 year period, it's a $7 million total cost of ownership. Well, how do you structure that into a financeable deal? And it's really, finding out from the customer if you show them, $5 million for a purchase up front and they go, whoa, wait a second, we don't have $5 million. The next question is, okay, well, what do you have? Or maybe in your back pocket, you've been talking with a company like 4Inc, and we've come up with a solution to say, okay, we think that they're around $2 million in their budget or 2.5. So you can structure it as such on the right-hand side here, where we're showing base plus options and just doing 3 equal payments. It equals the same as what that total cost of ownership, but you're showing it to them in a way that makes more sense for their budget. This allows for predictability for them. They know what they're going to be spending in the out years. It helps meet their budget objective. And they're not, again, this is all FAR compliant stuff. This is all acting within the parameters and scope of what they're allowed to do within, the procurement regulations that they have. And then the good news is on the back end, right, there's an upfront revenue, an upfront purchase that's happening where we are buying that stream of payments. And so there's a net 30 purchase that we fund for, in this case, this is showing kind of the difference between cost of financing to the total customer price. The difference that you see in between the 7.1 and the 6.4 is the cost of financing. So, spreading out the upfront costs here, receiving a large order for 6.4 instead of, hey, we might not have an opportunity because customer doesn't have the budget of what we're presenting. And so, of course, there's bigger commissions in here for you guys. The second example that we want to show you is when we're looking at subscription licenses. So kind of the same premise, but there isn't a heavy upfront. And so definitely the customer is not thinking that this deal is financed, right? This is, again, financing takes place on the back end between us parties here, OEM, channel partner, distribution, all collaborating about how this opportunity is going to be structured. So for this, we're showing, year 1, year 2, year 3, the 1.4 indicates this year's price. And then there's obviously going to be a 5 to 10% increase, which we normally see, right, year over year. And so you've got a 3 year ownership, or not ownership, but 3 year subscription cost here of 4.4 million. Well, if you get into a base plus option structure, often the OEMs will discount or keep the price consistent because you're buying it all up front. So then you can share in that goodness with the customer and show them some cost savings. Pretty elementary stuff, but this is how you sell the value of it. And I would highly recommend that you put a base plus options contract in front of them at the budgetary stage. You want to show that you don't want to give the 1 year quote because that can sometimes get submitted with the requisition package. And we want to make sure that we're setting this up for success early in the process. And so sell the value by talking to your customer about this. Sell the value by sending them a base plus options contract structure. And in the body of the email, you mention the cost savings and how you're able to get them a predictable payment stream, lock in pricing for the next 3 years without them obligating, etc. And again, an upfront funding here of $3.7 million on this opportunity for everybody down in the channel. Partners get paid up front if that's what they choose. Disty gets paid up front, and the OEM, of course, gets paid up front in these opportunities. And there is no liability really that falls on the partner. This falls on us as we are the financier. We are taking on the risk of these opportunities. Customers still reserve their rights to terminate for convenience, non-appropriate, etc. That's where we come in and we provide a full assessment, risk analysis of understanding what the opportunity looks like. And we really need to be singing off of the same sheet of music when it comes to these deals and collaborating the whole way through to make sure that we understand fully what the opportunity looks like, what's being sold, the expectation with the customer, and just that it's a critical need. And so here's an example of what a budgetary estimate looks like. I like to show this because some folks, more visual. I definitely am, and so I like to see this. This is just a sample of, say, a bill of materials for a base year. And by the way, we keep showing base plus 2. We do base plus 3, base plus 4. It just depends on the opportunity. Of what's being sold, past performance with the customer that will sometimes dictate the duration at which we can move forward in an opportunity. But just for 36 months is an ideal timeline, but we certainly finance longer durations. And so this just showing base plus option 1 and 2. Notice that it's not separately priced. We just show a quantity here. And then at the bottom, we put a price proposal or a price template or a table rather. And then there's a set of terms and conditions that go in, and that's usually not dictated until we understand what the RFQ and all the essential elements that bring up, make up the opportunity and the transaction. And then we'll give you the terms and conditions that need to be submitted in with your quote. They're not heavy. There's about 4 or 5 sentences that make up the terms and conditions, but as opportunities present, we can certainly walk through that process and share that with you. Let me pause here for a moment. Any questions? I don't see the chat box, Tony, so I don't know if you could take a look at that and just see if we've got any questions that are popping up here.
Nothing in there yet.
Okay. All right, well, I'm going to advance here, toss it over to you on the Doge-friendly solutions.
Okay. Sounds ironic, doesn't it? So, we've talked throughout this call about the value of these base plus structures for both you and for your customer, but we think it's worth spending a little more time just highlighting why the value prop is so important now more than ever, right? So we've always tried to demonstrate the value of this concept through obvious examples, right? Always focusing on the budget, getting everything now, regardless of appropriations, locking in pricing, the ease of contracting, and all that stuff is very important. But because of the current climate, the KOs have to do more than just figure out budget, right? They have to justify how and why they're contracting the way they are. And this is where, that reliance on industry is going to come in that I was referring to earlier. We're seeing that shift in the way that feds perceive the value that we bring them, and they're looking for us through you to help them justify why these contracts are important, not only for achieving savings, but other critical factors too, right? Like the one we hear the most about these days is, retiring tech debt, right? Technical debt. and how they've been in this procurement cycle, using that Band-Aid approach we spoke about, fixing or replacing, older technology based on available funding. But by the time they got the original plan executed, it took years. And the stuff that they fixed at the beginning of the cycle is now at its end of life or end of service, and they're right back where they started from, right? So, and on top of that, they're paying, unsustainably high maintenance costs to try to keep this stuff up and running. So it's a constant catch-up game, but it can be averted with a base plus solution, right? So not only does it get their system modernized and compliant, but it prevents them from taking on additional future tech debt through a better life cycle management strategy. Again, this is all stuff that we're starting to hear more from the government, and it just plays perfectly into the solution that we offer. Historically, when we've talked about the firm fixed price contracts that we work under, we highlight the no cost increases in option years and predictability and all that good stuff. But that price protection is more relevant and becomes infinitely more relevant in a world where there's looming tariffs and great uncertainty around future price increases. So we can demonstrate that, in a value proposition to the government. We're also having deeper conversations about maximizing buying power, right? So while they're forced to be more efficient and smarter about the way that they're doing procurement, they're sounding more like commercial deals where when you're taking advantage of OEM discounts like buying rates down, or there's other more commercial type programs that are being offered to help ease the challenges that some of the government contracting offices are facing. And this is it's a newer concept. I mean, to be talking about deals in this way, right? And we talk about the power of the dollar, right? So the money that the government is going to be, today's dollar is not going to be worth as much as it is today as it's going to be in the futures. But the deliverables in the option years are going to be the same. So essentially, what's happening is they're using a weaker dollar to make payments for the same structure that they're entering into under this firm fixed price contract. And again, we can help lay out this argument and these stories for them so that they can make the case internally when they need to. Um, the other example, in the contracting space is, in a Doge world, everybody's focusing on, government efficiency, and it's paramount, right? And they have to demonstrate this. And a base plus option year contract is a difference between competing something every 12 months versus simply exercising an option to renew, right? It's from a budget perspective, they're going to know exactly what they need today and every year after during the life of the contract to keep their operations running. And that's incredibly efficient and incredibly effective, not only from a contract perspective, but from an overall budget perspective as well. So, again, what we want to try to help you guys do is put forth these use cases that offer a way for the KOs to utilize industry to achieve mission objectives, right? This idea of public-private partnerships that we hear the current administration praising all the time, right? You're leveraging, excuse me, you're leveraging market capital to get to the end point that you need to get to modernize, to build your infrastructure out that's compliant, and whether it's in cyber or automation or AI, this is a far compliant, we say all the time, it's a legal, moral, and ethical way for them to procure. And by the way, it's being done by virtually every agency within the federal government. I think north of $2 billion a year gets procured by federal contracting officers through base plus option year contracts. So it's not new. It's not a new concept. It's something that's been in practice forever. There just hasn't been a whole lot of understanding around it. And that's what we want to try to help you do is demonstrate that value and this process to them, to introduce new ways to help them achieve their goals. Nikki, if you could go to the next slide, please. So just wanted to take a couple minutes and talk about, who qualifies, right? So what sort of agencies and what type of structures are looking for. And generally, we have worked with every agency across all three branches of the government, right? So any congressionally funded entity is fair game. And then we also look at, national laboratories, government corporations, and even what we refer to as quasi agencies, where some of their funding is appropriated and some is generated from their own revenue. Um, we really, the most important part when we're qualifying a deal is really establishing that essential use case, right? Like the need for the equipment has to align with the term that we'd be proposing. And the essentiality has to be such that even though the government can terminate for convenience or non-appropriation, the likelihood that they will is very low because the equipment or the solution is so essential or it's so integrated that it's highly unlikely to happen. We are vendor agnostic, right? We don't care what it is so long as, again, that essentiality story is there. And we can finance hardware, software. I mentioned we can roll in soft costs in some cases. We really don't, the technology doesn't really matter to us as much as the story does. So again, we reiterate, bring us in as early as possible, even if it's at the tire kicking stage, because it's going to take, the earlier we can get in there, we can frame out the opportunity. And again, not all opportunities are financeable, right? So we're going to take a look at it, make sure that it does align with that essential story. Um, the agency is not one that's currently going through a Doge audit and is in jeopardy of losing funding or contracts or what have you. Again, we can help you frame all of that out and try to put together a proposal for your customer. We get asked a lot about deal size. Unfortunately, it takes as many resources and as much time to underwrite $50,000 as it does $50 million. So we try to, we have to make sure that the economics work. So typically we're shooting for a total contract value of 600,000. But as with everything in the federal space, the details matter, right? So if you have a strategic customer or an opportunity that's on the smaller side but could lead to a bigger opportunity down the road, then we'll take all of that into consideration. And if we need to do a smaller deal to get more business on the back end, then we'll certainly consider doing that. So um, the terms again, typically we like to keep them at 36 months. That's ideal. That's usually the software deals that we're doing. But we can go out as far as 5 years if it's, infrastructure or, if the essential use case supports going out that long. So all of that is things we'll discuss as we break down the opportunity and walk through it. So um, uh, the only other point that we wanted to kind of point out here too, and Nikki mentioned it earlier, is from the government's perspective, it's not a finance deal, right? It is from the government's perspective, it's a base plus option year contract, and all the financing is done sort of behind the scenes between us and the prime contractor, right? So that the transparency of all of this is critical. The partnership is critical. We're relying on each other to really understand an opportunity and build it out properly. So partnership is really important in this world, and we look forward to working through this with you guys. You already were on the next slide. So the last thing that I wanted to cover, and I think we might be no, we're good on time. Is when you're having these conversations or you're listening to what your customers' needs are or you're reviewing your own pipeline, there's things that you can be focusing on that might pop up to say, hey, this could be an opportunity where the government's not necessarily asking for it, but it might be a good opportunity to initiate a base plus conversation with your customer, right? And we talked about a lot of these, but the biggest one is probably, or most common one is, they simply don't have the budget, right? They just don't have the funds for everything they need. So that would certainly be a good candidate for one of these contracts. If it's end of life, end of service, right? That whole tech debt conversation that we talked about, are they wasting a ton of money on maintaining an antiquated system? Like, right, there's a way for you to present an option that's really attractive that helps them, get line of sight to completing an entire mission and paying for it over time. But some of the other questions that you can be asking yourself as you're going through things, and we challenge you to do this, right? Like just look at your pipeline and say, hey, are there different contracts from an OEM that all have different pop dates? We could bring those under an umbrella contract that, are all unified under one period of performance date. It's going to simplify contracting, allow them to take advantage of, some maybe OEM initiatives or multi-year discounting. Like that's a fantastic opportunity. We do a ton of those. Also, if you have a customer who has a contract, a 1-year contract that has renewed year after year after year, there might be an opportunity there to turn that into a base plus contract to take advantage of some of those benefits that we just talked about, right? The discounting and the ease of contracting. Um, are they an entity that has more OpEx dollars than CapEx, right? If they lost some of their funding, they might have more visibility to OpEx, and we can structure these deals so that they can actually change the color of money that they use to pay for them. So that's, we've seen a lot of questions around that and as a service, and that all fits into that sort of OpEx driven model, and we have those capabilities. Some of the other things you can ask is, are they behind on meeting mandates, whether it's cyber or automation or whatever it is. There's ways to introduce means by which they can acquire the software that they need to be compliant in those areas. And same thing with, right, if you have an agency that just lost a bunch of headcount, right? There's probably solutions that we could offer that will help them fill in those gaps to help accomplish missions. So all these things are things just to think about as you're going through your pipeline and qualifying new leads and having conversations with your customers. Um, we just highly recommend that you bring us in early, that we can help you kind of walk through and lay out what the opportunity is and see if this is a good candidate for a base plus option year contract. Nikki, you can go to the next slide.
Yeah, so why four? Why would you work with four in this space? Definitely, first and foremost, we've got competitive rates, right? There's only a few of us in this market that provide financing when it comes to federal. And I think all of us are pretty competitive when it comes to the rates. But ultimately, when you're looking at a finance partner, you want to make sure who you're aligning with really knows this business. And I think arguably on our side, we've got an amazing team of experts. The knowledge, the depth of knowledge that we have, and the experience that we have is like none other. And this is across our whole business, from our C-suite on down to our inside guys. I mean, everybody has a tremendous amount of experience to help walk through this process, and we understand all the sensitivities. We're often looking way ahead and understanding where we think the gotchas are going to be, and then providing the guidance and the support to make sure that the deal stays on track. We have a very dynamic financing platform. This just means through the evolution of a deal, right? You go in and you're selling an opportunity to an end user, and the end user goes, "Hey, great, love to see a budgetary quote." And then this thing starts getting into the requisition package, sent to procurement, and then it takes on a whole new look and feel once it gets to procurement. And so making sure that you're aligned with a partner who, again, understands where those gotchas and snags and things are going to be, and anticipating them before they come is just critical in making sure that you get to the right outcome here. For Inc., we have a very, very deep bench of funding sources that we work with. Sometimes it's our own capital. Sometimes we're working with private banks. Other times it's private equity, insurance, etc. And a lot of these entities have different tolerances for financing deals. And so, especially in today's market with Doge and all the things that are going on, everyone is reading the news. Everyone knows what's going on right now in federal. And there's a lot of lenders that have pulled out and have decided to sit on the bench just to see how everything's going to shake out. We've really educated and worked very closely. A lot of the relationships that we have are exclusive, not all, but a lot of them are exclusive where we are a trusted advisor in federal because, again, of that knowledge and the experience that we bring. And so we've got a set of lenders that have continued to carry on and fund deals throughout this process, relying on us that we're going to bring good deals and opportunities. And so we go through an evaluation, as Tony was talking about earlier. We understand the critical nature of it. And so us being able to walk through that process, again, is moving towards getting to the certainty of the outcome. And that is to get your deal closed. We're not known for leaving anyone on the 5 yard line. So, as Tony had said earlier, making sure that we are all singing off of the same sheet of music is really critical. This is a partnership. This is all of us putting our necks out there to get these large strategic deals done and closed and hopefully make your number for the year. And so, being really candid, right? Being really open and honest about where we are in a deal and in a cycle is really important. Making sure that you, the OEM, you, the channel partner, and us involved in the transaction are all kind of, again, singing off of that same sheet of music and knowing where we are with the opportunity is going to help get to the certainty of that outcome. And so invite you to come and talk with us. This is actually, let me back up here for a second. Here's the next sessions that are coming up on proposal and deal closing. We'll keep you advised about that. We will send out an email with those invites to kind of continue going through the life cycle of a finance transaction. But I wanted to share with you, just highlight real quickly our financial solutions team. Some of you, may know that we have a committee. This is our committee on the back end where we all talk about the merits of an opportunity in a transaction to kind of get on board and say, yeah, we feel comfortable with funding and securing capital to finance opportunities. We go through this evaluation with all this team here is just a bunch of experts that have been in this industry for a long time, bring a wealth of knowledge. And so welcome you to come and speak with us. If you have any questions, and we didn't get to them here, Tony, is there anything before we wrap up here? Anything in the
Yeah,
chat?
there is one question. Somebody asked, what's the best way to finance the gap between Forang's single payment structure and the vendor's requirement for upfront payment before shipping the equipment? So in our experience, and Nikki, correct me if I'm wrong, generally the OEMs that we've worked with have not required payment before shipping. I think we've seen requests come in where there was maybe like staged funding, right? Like 20% would be due here, or there'd be sort of a phased in payment structure. Again, our transactions get funded when equipment is accepted by the government. That's the critical point for us. But that's not to say that we couldn't figure out if there was a way to be able to enable the prime to be able to pay all the invoices that come due to them prior to that acceptance. It's just a little different, but we could, to Nikki's point, and I can say this coming from a bank where it was an OCC regulated entity and there were layers and layers of approvals. One of the things that I personally love about Four is that this group of people you see on the screen here is the committee, and this is the decision makers, right? Like we are, small enough but experienced enough to be very quick and agile with responses. And if there's a situation where there's a long lead time between when we anticipate acceptance and when shipping or POs invoices are going to come due, then we can sit and talk through it and figure out if there's a solution to help you guys through that. So it's a very long-winded answer to a question, but hopefully that helped.
No, I think, and to that point, Tony, there's wonderful, that we can be creative with this, right? And so
Right.
I say bring us a challenge and let's see if there's something that we can whiteboard together to come up with a solution that makes sense. Financing is not like a stamp, a cookie cutter type of approach. Each deal has its own uniqueness to it, usually. And after doing this for 10 years plus, it's interesting. You still see new things every day. I think that's what keeps Tony and I going in this is
Absolutely.
that no two deals necessarily look the same. And so if there is something that you're thinking about that you want to whiteboard, we love to do that. We are in our offices in Herndon, Virginia, at least 3 days a week. We love to have visitors. But if you'd like to reach out to us separately following this call or at a later date, this has our contact information here. We will be distributing this recording so that you can access it at a later time. And just, yeah, we thank you very much for joining us today. Hope that you found some of this information useful and that you'll join us for the next session, which we will email you some of those details at a later date. And just thank you so much. We appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.